Welcome back. This next story is coming from Cal Matters, titled A Scholarship for Black California Students Has to Accept White Applicants, and Here's Why. Uh, Before we start this, the fact that there was ever anything that was specifically for any one particular group of people based on their race, gender, sexuality, religious beliefs, if there's anything that does that, it's inherently racist and it's also illegal according to the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Having a program specifically for one group is just as illegal as having a program that specifically blocks out one particular group. Now, they've been trying to do that when it comes to straight white male students. A lot of these programs, they say whites are not allowed to apply for. They were only saying that because there was no enforcement. Who was going to come along? Who's going to come behind you and enforce the Civil Rights Act against these college institutions and these programs? Now they're actually doing something about it, and this should have never been a thing in the first place. I mean, how dare you even suggest something that's only for one group of kids that excludes others just because of your assumed bias on their lifestyle or background or how their parents were. It's crazy. People will let their own insecurity and their own jealousy, envy of another group, and it would play into their inferiority complex, where to the point where they would think that breaching the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which apparently you would think that, the black students would love, they didn't want to respect it. The people behind the program didn't respect it, and they wanted to discriminate against white students, which is wrong, and we cannot allow that. Welcome. Okay, so a scholarship for Black students at UC San Diego is now available to anyone, regardless of race, after students and right leaning nonprofit organizations sued the university for discrimination this July. So that means that it took a right leaning organization to care about fairness and equality. Why didn't the left leaning organizations care about fairness and equality? That's a question they're going to have to ask themselves. The plaintiff argued that the scholarship fund violated a series of laws, including the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, which was put in place to protect Black Americans in the South. Okay. One of the students, Kai Peters, said he was denied access to the scholarship because he isn't Black. Peters sent a written statement to the Cal Matters through the Californians for Equal Rights Foundation, the nonprofit plaintiff. He said his lack of access is an example of institutional racism, a phrase that was created in part to characterize how the government institutions discriminated against Blacks and Black Americans. The irony is now, in reverse, you can see that they were actually doing this to white Americans. This is institutionalized racism. When I see Black people tell me that, they can never show me nothing on the books where they were specifically barred from something because of their race. But this guy, Kai Peters, actually had receipts. How many hundreds of thousands of white students saw this and were deterred and didn't even want to sue because they were afraid of the backlash? They were afraid of being called racist or a white supremacist just because you wanted equality at school. It's a shame that these kids were being groomed to accept racism and discrimination, which should never be allowed. I don't see the irony. Joshua Thompson, an attorney for the Pacific Lead Foundation, which represented the plaintiff, the idea is that we don't want government actors outforcing their discrimination. We don't. We don't. The Black Alumni Scholarship Fund for UC San Diego students is now called the Goins Alumni Scholarship Fund, named after its founding donor, Lennon Goins. According to a press release last week, its website says each scholarship is worth $2,500 and that nearly 275 scholarships have been awarded since 2016. In my opinion, that's not a lot, but if you look at the racial makeup, it's going to say 100% of those recipients identified as Black. So that means they discriminated against every other racial group that applied, every single one. which is illegal. The rebranded scholarship program is just one of numerous initiatives in California that have come under scrutiny in the last 2 years. In 2023, the Supreme Court overturned precedent that allowed private universities in the state to use affirmative action. And this year, the Trump administration has ended numerous campus initiatives promoting diversity. They were not promoting diversity, they were promoting exclusion. Their idea of diversity was excluding anyone white, especially if you were straight and white. Double, especially if you're a straight white male. Excluding straight white males, but taking in other students does not mean you're diverse. It just means you're biased, you're racist, and you're openly discriminating against someone, but you don't want people to openly discriminate against you. You say you're being discriminated against, but you can never show me on paper where or how. There's no one on record saying you can't do this because you're black. But we have proof on record that you have discriminated and told certain white people that they won't qualify because they're not black. That is a problem. That's a huge problem with me. That's why I don't trust these schools. I don't trust these organizations. And these black kids that are getting these scholarships knowing that it took racism and discrimination against others, they should not have even wanted to accept them. But that's why these kids have a hard time and they struggle in society, because in the real world, you're going to have to deal with people that are not black. Now, if you're planning on going to this university or an HBCU, but once you graduate, you're moving to Kenya or Ghana, where you're going to be surrounded by other black people, then being immersed in blackness in an HBCU will prepare you for Africa. It won't prepare you for the United States, where you're going to have to deal with people of other races. If these schools are enforcing an inferiority complex against white people to the point where you find it acceptable to discriminate against them, then how are you going to be able to function in polite society, in American society? You will not. And now we wonder why so many are in prison and why they're being fired from their jobs. They could never assimilate with American society. Being allowed in school to discriminate against white people, when you're not able to do that in the real world, well, then obviously you're not prepared for the real world, because these rules don't apply outside of these universities. So basically, these universities are failing these students while they're there by giving them a false sense of reality where they think discrimination is okay as long as the person that you're doing it to is white. Other changes are more subtle. In February, Bakersfield College described its Chicano Latino pre-commencement event as a means to encourage Chicano Latino students to participate in graduation celebrations. But by the time the graduation rolled out in May, the word Chicano Latino had been removed from the sentence, as it should. I'm Latino, but I'm not Chicano. I don't want to see anything I don't want to see any identifiers on my appearance. I want you to be worried about my merits. I want you to be worried about my grades. I want you to be worried about my attendance. I want you to be worried about how I performed. I don't want you to be worried about how I look, how I sound. I don't want you to be worried about my appearance, my background. That should be inconsequential. Only thing that should matter is, can I perform? Checking all these boxes is ridiculous. That should not matter. The press release about the Black Alumni Scholarship Fund didn't address the reason for the change, as a spokesperson for the San Diego Foundation, Hiram Soto, declined to comment further because they're ashamed. Everything, it's all projection. They scream that these other people are racist and they discriminate against them, but they're actually the ones who are racist and discriminating against others. That's why anything somebody says to you, they're guilty of it, but they're projecting it onto you. That's how it works, unfortunately. Cal Matters analysis of the fund's website shows how the university changed its course. They had to, or they were going to lose their funding, and the Trump administration is not playing with these universities. I hope they get defunded anyway. They're scamming these kids. Whatever these kids are calling an education once they leave these schools, they're not being hired anywhere where they can afford to pay back this fraudulent education. So I think they should be shut down anyway, but that's just my opinion. In September, the website said the University Scholarship Fund was founded in 1983 by Goins, expanded an education opportunity for high-achieving, civic-minded African-American students, focusing on admitted Black students with a record of community service and resiliency to racial and other identity challenges. Everything I just said is mental. Resiliency to racial and other identity challenges. Those are all mental. Those are all challenges that go on in your mind. You're overcoming what a lot of these people do. They want to pretend that they can read the minds of anybody around them that's white. Well, these white people think this, white people think that. So if you can overcome these challenges, they're all mental challenges. You have to overcome yourself. What they're saying is that these students, if they can overcome their inferiority complex and their envy and jealousy of others, where they can function, then I guess they would qualify for the program, which is very hard to do because 99% of them cannot. And I've been able to discern that from having these conversations over the past 10 years, asking questions. And people get uncomfortable because the answer when it comes out of their mouth is so insane. The amount of racism and discrimination they have towards whites and towards others, it's disgusting. That's why they can't really have these conversations openly, and they have to kind of be around each other, because once they start spewing their rhetoric around non-blacks, people will look at them and say, maybe you're like a sick black supremacist. So that's what they were basically saying. They were overcoming mental struggles with identity and an inferiority complex. There was no mistake that this fund was by and for the Black community. 100% BASF scholarships identify as Black African American. The website said, adding that the goal of the scholarship fund was to increase Black graduation at UC San Diego from 2% to 5% of degrees awarded. Why is it that there's such a low graduation rate? Why is the admittance rate so high, graduation rate too low? It's because they lower their standards to bring in these kids who really don't want to go to the school and really are not there to learn. They don't want to work. So you're admitting kids that don't want to be there, and then you're surprised when they don't finish and graduate. It doesn't make any sense. You're bringing them there for diversity quotas. Remember, these schools get, even when they have an endowment, they get loans from banks, and these banks get loans from bigger banks. And these bigger banks have an ESG score that they were putting on these other banks and these universities. So they had to implement DEI if they wanted to qualify for grants and loans. So this was all forced. Now that the ESG has been destroyed and DEI is over with, and now we're going back to meritocracy, there is not going to be a sense of, let me discriminate against white kids to hire all these other less qualified kids who are not here for their merits. And also, this whole Black African American, those are two different groups. To be Black is to be of American descent. Black is an American thing. There's no other country where people are calling themselves Blacks. I've been to Africa. They don't say we're Blacks. No one refers to themselves as a color. According to the UN, you're not even a human if you're only a color. You must have a nationality to be recognized. But if you're considering yourself Black, then you're not considered an American. And African American is someone, literally, you or your parents are literally immigrants here from Africa, first generation, and you are now living in the United States. So it's funny when you see an American Black person saying, I'm African American, and then a person who literally speaks Swahili is standing behind them like, then what the fuck am I? Because I'm an actual African American. You speak English, you're a Christian, your whole family has always been here since the beginning of recorded history of the United States. So how are we both African, but you've never been to Africa? So those are two distinct groups. And I'll be honest, the Blacks are not welcoming or accepting if an African tries to jump into this program, because then they'll be more specific and say, well, it's actually for a, what is it called? FDA, that foundational, FBA, foundational Black Americans, or the descendant of slaves. They can't tell you the name of their ancestor that was a slave, but they tell you that they descended from them. Also, rather insane, in my opinion. And it's crazy. I'm the only person doing a story about this. I went through looking for other people that had maybe something talking about this. No one wanted to do this story. I wonder why. Despite decades of scholarships, the goal remains unattained. In 2023, 2024, just under 3% of UC San Diego's undergraduate degrees awarded went to students who identify as Black or African American, according to the system's data. So what does that tell you? There are kids that are taking out hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, and they're not even finishing. They're quitting because they didn't want to go to school in the first place. Because to go to school means you want to work. These people don't want to work. They want to be taken care of. They want an overseer. They want a warden. They want a master. They want someone that's going to tell them what to do, let them live for free, give them free food, and take care of them. They don't want to work. So going to school is kind of pointless, and that's why eventually they just leave. They're not there to go to school. They're there because they need somewhere to go. It's kind of like an adult daycare for people in between childhood and adulthood. You need somewhere to go for a few years. But if you don't maintain your grades and you're not going to graduate, well, then why'd you even, you can't get a refund on the debt. So it was pointless. It's basically a scam. It's a scam. And I don't understand why people are so glad to tell me that such and such got approved to go to a school. I'm like, on a scholarship, is anything paid for? No, they got to do a student loan. This is nothing you should celebrate. This is a bad thing. But that's only if you think about it and you ask me. Don't ask me and I won't tell you the truth. But if you ask me, I'm going to tell you this was a horrible deal. Racial discrimination is illegal in the US, but isn't that a bitch? There's a but. But in California, the standard of what constitutes discrimination depends on, in part, on whether the entity is public or private. While private entities, including nonprofits and foundations, have long offered scholarships and programs for certain racial or ethnic groups, arguing that spending money is a form of free speech, state agencies, including UC campuses, are prohibited from any form of affirmative action after California voters passed a Proposition 209 in 1996. So basically, there's you can't bring a grievance for discrimination because they passed a proposition in 1996. Claiming now that spending money is free speech, it's like they're just abusing the Constitution and they're perverting the Constitution so that they can get away with doing things that are inherently illegal. They're finding loopholes where they can discriminate against people who are white without being held accountable. And they'll say, "Oh, it's to balance the playing field." That's you can't balance a playing field by breaking the law. That's ridiculous. To avoid legal scrutiny, UC San Diego moved the Black Alumni Scholarship Fund to the private San Diego Foundation in 1998. So that's how they were able to get around this being illegal, is they moved it to a private fund from the public. And then I guess they thought that because it's private, that it was legal. But all it took was one lawsuit to blow that out of the water. But again, people were just so discouraged and so afraid that they have never actually brought litigation, and they should have done this a long time ago. In my opinion, hopefully other schools are going to follow. In the lawsuit, Thompson and his legal team allege that the university has remained involved in the scholarship operation. Our allegations were that UC San Diego officials were conspiring with the private entity to get around Prop 209 and the Equal Protection Clause. Specifically, he said the university was giving the San Diego Foundation information about which students identify as Black on their college applications so that the leadership of the fund included some university officials. Wow. So they were looking at how you identified on your application to enroll, and that's how they knew which people to offer this scholarship to. That's utterly disgusting. That's sick. That's insane. So much went into passing the 1904 Civil Rights Act just for the very people it was allegedly supposed to help. Those same people are now using it against others. Even they don't believe in civil rights. Even they have no respect for fair treatment, and none of them believe in equality. At their core, the community is communist. And this is another example of it. This is insane. The Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871 prohibits government agencies from using private entities to discriminate. So that's what the California University was doing, using a private entity to discriminate. But the KKK Act of 1871 already prohibits that. These are laws that are already on the books. People just didn't challenge them. That's why you have to read everything and you cannot have fear. Back then, government agencies and law enforcement, especially in the South, often used private groups, most famously the KKK, to terrorize the black community. I don't know. I know Bloods and Crips. I know GDs and Vice Lords. I know they terrorized the black community. I wouldn't call what the KKK was doing terrorizing the black community because their numbers, the numbers of death, a one weekend in Chicago could totally eclipse the entire effectiveness of the KKK, according to the numbers. So I don't, I wouldn't even, I'll be honest, when compared to what we see today, the KKK was nothing. The KKK was a pimple, and they just used a little acne cream to get rid of it. It was nothing. It was nothing. Nothing compared to what we're seeing now that they're doing to themselves. By working with the private foundation to support black students, UC San Diego is guilty of the same kind of nefarious behavior as the government and law enforcement agencies of the Jim Crow South, said Thompson. Absolutely correct. The same basis, they just swapped roles. You know, it's crazy. It's like if you went through something, why would you want to put somebody else through it? You know, they said the Jews went through a Holocaust, but yet they put the Palestinians through a Holocaust. And they're saying Jim Crow was horrible for black people, but as soon as they got a chance, they were able to switch it around and do the same thing to white people. It makes me question everything because people wouldn't do that to somebody that if it was done to them, they wouldn't go along with it. They wouldn't think it was okay and they wouldn't feel comfortable doing it. Soon, let's see here. This is the full tradition of our civil rights laws. Citing both the KKK Act and more recent laws, Prop 209, we don't want the government to discriminate against people on the basis of race, including white people. Soon after filing the lawsuit, Thompson said the scholarship fund reached out to his legal team and agreed to change its name and open the application to students who didn't identify as black. They didn't have a choice. Because of this lawsuit, which I'm pretty sure they probably are going to come to a financial settlement for discrimination, which they've already won. This organization is already waving the white flag. They know what they were doing has been illegal for all these years, and it probably it can probably open the floodgate for other people to file grievances as well and sue. And this is also going to set precedent, so it's going to go around to other universities. There can never be any black only anything, just like there can't be any white only anything. This whole color nonsense should have been done away with when the 1964 Civil Rights Act passed. Now, if that holds no weight anymore, and you should be able to discriminate against whoever you want to, well, then that's actually my preference. I don't think you should be forced to have to tolerate the insufferable because the government is forcing us to. That's why I hope the government continues to shrink under Trump. He said other changes may be on the horizon. In February, the Pacific Legal Foundation sued UC San Francisco's Benoit Children's Hospital regarding another program aimed at minority high school students. Thompson said the San Francisco University system is now negotiating how to continue with that program. You're not going to be able to continue with the program as it is currently discriminating. You're going to need a financial settlement, and you're going to have to make it open to everyone, including white students. And I'm sure there's going to be more oversight that's going to pay attention to this, and they're going to be looking to sue these universities because we have a legal grounds and we can prove that there was discrimination. This isn't a hypothetical. Well, I think that they discriminate. No. This is actually in black and white. That's what makes this special and different. These negotiations have happened informally, so there's no written settlement agreement to show how universities are responding and what changes actually occur. Today, and when they sign these settlements and they're compensated financially, they usually sign an NDA where they're not able to talk about this or disclose it. So you're not going to see it, but they are settling with these people. They have to, and they're opening it up for everybody, including white people, white students. Today, the Scholarship Fund website says its applications are open to UC San Diego students who are involved in community service and those with demonstrated ability to overcome major challenges, as well as other race-neutral criteria, and that's how it should be. The website now includes no mention of black students. Bravo, Cal Matters, for drawing up this article. Bravo to Mr. Thompson, who actually had the balls and the guts to go against these universities. This is not something that everybody's willing to do. I'm sure it wasn't free. And it's not easy finding a lawyer to represent you when it comes to these type of cases. This actually set precedent. So that means it's the first of its kind. And the other ones, if they settled, no one knew how the outcome, so it wasn't able to inspire. But now, because of this article, and now this is getting out, it's going to spread around to high schools and colleges that have been discriminating against people, coming up with minority-only scholarships or minority-only, loans. I mean, that is blatant illegal discrimination, and it should be done away with. I'm glad that this is occurring. And if you guys really want equality, well, then it has to be on both. It has to be both ways. It has to be both. It has to be even. And this was not even. This was not fair at all. So bravo to the students that are fighting back. And of course, this is California where everything has already went to hell. So, I mean, besides, it's not like these kids are really getting an education in the first place. But what's right is right. So, do me a favor, like and subscribe, share this video. No one else is doing a story about this, so I just did. If you have any opinions or you want to share your thoughts, send me a message. We can talk about it. If you want to come on and talk to me, I'll send you a link to my StreamYard and we can have a debate. Right wing Rico, the single boyfriend, and I'll be back shortly with another topic. We'll be on live again in about 25 minutes. Thank you and see you shortly. Cheers.